to the Chad and Mo Movie Hour. We hope that you enjoyed Sunset Boulevard as we take a trip down memory lane and explore some of the classics, some of the film noir classics, and we are back with another one of Chad's brilliant recommendations. We are here with Double Indemnity, so I am going to raise a glass and say cheers. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. And don't forget to comment. And yeah, cheers. Let's get into Double Indemnity.
Well, first of all, I just want to make notice of on this brilliant cover that she has like the sweater that was so popular in that era, which is I forget the name of it, of course, right now. But if you've ever seen the brilliant movie where Johnny Depp plays Ed Woods, who's the famous 50s film director that was supposedly, a terrible director. Ed Woods had the fetish of wearing this exact type of sweater. It was one of his fetishes when he would dress up as a woman, and it's this very soft. What is it called? Do you remember what they're called? I don't know if there's a name.
Like the material or the style?
The material. It was that very cashmere. Basically like a cashmere sweater, but like they were like very like fluffy and like, Anyway, she's to die for in this film. I have so much to get into and unpack. So what we're doing is we're doing Double Indemnity, which is a 1944 American psychological thriller film noir, meaning dark film, which is one of my favorite type of films. So it's just a brilliant classic film. This film was directed by and partially written by Billy Wilder, who also did Sunset Boulevard, which we've already done, and he did Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe. Those, I think, are his touchstones for me. This film stars the great Barbara Stanwyck.
Gorgeous.
And the male of the man is Fred MacMurray, and opposite him is the great Edward G. Robinson, who's the little bit older gentleman in the film, who is kind of such a great character too in this film.
Is it Keys?
Yes, Keys. Yeah. And Edward G. Robinson is such a storied actor who's done so many incredible things. I have such a love affair with Barbara Stanwyck, who is absolutely beautiful in this film. And the way she speaks, her skin, the lighting on her, the care to light her, the wardrobe, the wig she wears in this film, which I have an entire tangent that I'm going to go on her hair alone.
Bangs! Exclamation point.
Okay, can we say the word? Iconic?
I think it's warranted, yes.
The hair is iconic. Madonna has copied it, of course. Many people have copied it. This is bangs before Betty Page, and before Dita Von Teese now, who we have. But this is like the origin of this particular style. It's a little bit different than we see in those people I mentioned, but this iconic hairstyle, which I didn't even really fully realize was a wig. If you listen to the commentary on like the Blu-ray, there's a historian commentary, which some of these older films tend to pick a film historian to wax poetic and deliver lots of like actual more technical information. But whoever they picked, I am opposed to, because he says that her hair is very obviously a wig and it doesn't look good. I disagree. I think it's very convincing.
I didn't know it was a wig.
I was totally fooled. And I think the style is like so A++, and it's so iconic. And oh my God. So my edition comes with these amazing postcards. So I'm going to show some of these.
Show and tell.
Yes, show and tell. This is Keys in his office with looks like some other people in the office.
Oh my God, colorized. That's amazing.
Yes, this is another one of the posters. So this is one of my all-time favorite films. These actually aren't the best images. This is like a deleted scene at the end where they were gonna put him in the gas chamber, and they never did. They never showed it, but they filmed it. The lead character went to the gas chamber.
Spoiler alert. The
Yeah,
movie's 100 years old.
yeah. What's the statute of limitations on a 1944?
For me, it's 6 months. If you haven't seen it in the last 6 months, I'm so sorry. Talking about it.
So Wilder considered Double Indemnity his best film in terms of having the fewest technical mistakes, and like in his opinion. So he mentioned that he was like extremely proud of this film, and I think it's one of his best works. It's interesting that the same guy, Billy Wilder, can have such a heavy hand in some work of arts that feel so different, but are also equally so great. So some like Hot, if you've ever seen it, you said you'd seen it, ages ago, but is a very famous Marilyn Monroe movie, black and white. All three of the films I'm going to talk about right now are black and white. But it's a very like it's a very like quirky comedy. It's definitely not like a serious film. And then you have his film that we just did, Sunset Boulevard, which has like this total over the top vibe, which is like its own character. And then you have this film, which I would say is a lot more stoic and quiet and suspenseful. And but all three by the same guy, all three works of like a master. So hats off to Billy Wilder, one of my favorite directors for that reason. But yeah, I love the story of this film, which centers around the law of double indemnity, which if you don't know means that if you're under an insurance contract and for life insurance, the person dies under a specific rare instances that contract pays out double. So that's what's called double indemnity. Am I getting that right? I think I'm getting that.
Yes, I am a former licensed insurance agent, so I can say that you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. If there's like, it has to be an accidental death, and then it has to be under that, there has to be like very specific and rare parameters, and then the policy will pay out double whatever it's worth. Yeah.
So I just love that for a film noir, like
and it's just a great fucking title.
It is too. Yes, it is. And I just want to say, like, again, Barbara Stanwyck, like, she's everything. She should be more of a gay icon than she is. She's underrated. And everyone says, everything's underrated, but she is definitely underrated. She, to me, is like Marilyn Monroe level, Madonna level gay icon. She needs to.
Hey, what else has she been in, Chad, that people might know?
I went on like a tear with her and watched like all her old films, but there aren't a lot of like super high profile films that we would know today that she's done other than Double Indemnity.
Okay.
She like she did a more of like a couple Western films that I've seen where she actually sings in them, and similar to Monroe, she did a lot of like the Westerns and some film noirs like this. This by far is my favorite film she's done. But she's really good in everything she's done. So what I do with these older films and older actors is like I will go on. So I have Direct TV, or I guess it's AT&T now, where you can go and pull on demand just the Turner Classics channel. And then go by actor or actress. So I'll get like on a Betty Davis kick and I'll just pull up all their films on Betty Davis, no commercials, and I'll just like watch 2 or 3 of them in an afternoon. You can do that with Davis, you can do that with Barbara Stanwyck from this film. But yes, Joan Crawford, what have you. But that's a great.
We need to do a mommy's dearest moment, like maybe a movie hour.
Yes.
We just okay. I digress. Sorry, I got excited. Go ahead.
Baby Jane. We have to do Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, where they collide. But so in this film, she plays Phyllis, with the hair, she has a lot of iconography around her, right? Whether it be her anklet that she wears, her very specific hairstyle, her sweater. I believe it's called an Angora sweater.
It's rabbits for Angora. You're right.
So not vegan, but that's okay. That's okay. It's a highly fetishized thing, right? Just like leather or
Yeah. It's
but
extremely soft, yeah.
a fetishized thing. Yes, and it's fabulous. In that regard, you know, we can fake it now. It doesn't have to be real animal hair or whatever. But yeah, or so what are some of her other traits? The way she talks, it's so great in this film. The anklet, she sits in a specific chair in her living room. I love the scene where she and Fred MacMurray meet. And you know, the dialogue in this movie is incredible, the way it's written. And he says, you know, that's a honey of an anklet that you have on there. And she's a married woman, and she says, you know, there's a speed limit in this town. It's 40. Yes, it's 45. He says, how fast was I going? She says 90. They're telling him, but she's also a woman who's in an unhappy marriage, and she's fully, you know, we learn more by the end that she's playing him, basically, for lack of a better word. But she's also toying with the idea of him in this first scene where they meet. She's very open and interested to him, but she's also like, whoa, slow your roll. You're going 90 in a 45. But and there's a great line when he leaves their first meeting where she says, I wonder, she makes another smart remark, and she goes, I wonder if I know what you mean. And he says, I wonder if you wonder. And that is so great. That's so intelligently written, because he knows he's calling her on her shit, like, you don't wonder, you know exactly what I mean. And it's great dialogue. I love all the dialogue. There's a lot of voiceover, which is so moody and so film noir. If you get into this genre of film noir, you'll see that there's a lot of tropes of that genre that are on display in this film really well, like the moody voiceover, the black and white lighting, a lot of good use of shadow. Yeah, so it's just great.
I remember, because I had heard of this movie, and it's possible I may have seen it at some point in my life, but I totally forgot if I had, and I did remember it. So I'm so grateful for your recommendation. And, you know, I mean, being black and white, I mean, it's beautiful. And I would argue that as beautiful as Sunset Boulevard is, I think this, in terms of like black and white, and to your point, like the use of light and shadow, like I would argue that this is even more stunning. Like the way, first of all, she's beautiful. Like she's just a beautiful bitch. Okay.
Yes.
And the way black and white, and maybe they're using filters as well. I don't know what was going on back then. Maybe that they had Instagram and we just didn't know, but like, just there is the skin is pristine. Her skin is
the makeup.
Yeah. The contour, the way black and white works for the contour, and also the way black and white makes the eyes sparkle, like, and there's a lot of like staring off or staring directly to the camera, where like the light hits the moisture on the eyeball, and you get that twinkle that you just don't get in colored movies. Yeah, it's amazing. And much like Sunset Boulevard, it does begin with an like a narration, you know, you're getting that moment from the beginning, but you're also getting, which is common from that era, is that vaudevillian, you know, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, you know, cadence in the talking, you know, like, which I love. And it plays over the top in Sunset Boulevard, which is perfect. And in this movie, which is a little bit more realistic, or maybe just more grounded in reality, if you will. You're still getting it. But the writing, and I remember when you said Double Indemnity is great, but you specifically like called my attention to the dialogue. You said it has the best dialogue, and it does. Like literally 90% of my notes are quotes of dialogue from this movie. It's highly quotable. I don't know what happened to writing like this. Now, clearly it wouldn't work today, but just the back and forth, the quips, and that whole line, where she's like, she's like, you're in a 45 mile per hour speed limit, whatever zone, and he's like, well, how fast am I going? And she's like, you're going 90 miles an hour, baby, and and why don't you pull me over and get off your motorcycle? And it's just like the musicality of it is so good. And when he talks about her anklet, because they call attention to her anklet several times, that's a great line. And what's the other one that I wanted to say? When he first gets to her house, because he's going to her house because he's an insurance agent, right? And he's trying to meet her husband, Mr. Dietrichson, to update his life insurance or whatever, right? Normal goings on. And instead of greeting the husband, the housekeeper lets him in, and she's at the top of the stairs in a towel. And, he's like, well, when's your husband coming or whatever? And he says something like, why don't we talk when he makes a pun about insurance. And he's like, I'm here to talk to you about insurance. And he says, quote, well, you're not fully covered. And he's talking about the coverage, but also the fact that she's half undressed. It's so good. And then she gets dressed and she comes downstairs to meet him. And she looks in the mirror and she's like, I hope I didn't keep you waiting too long. And he's like, no. And then she's like, well, I hope I've got my face on straight. Like, I love that line. I hope I've got my face on straight.
I love it. I love it to pieces. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like, writing, it has devolved a lot. I think I've said this in other movie hours, but it bears repeating that writing is often the downfall of a lot of these more modern day films. And it's unfortunate. I don't know. I think there is writing talent out there. There certainly is, but whether they're not given the time or they just aren't finding the inspiration that they need. But I think it's an area that really suffers now. And of course, the writing today wouldn't be anything like what we're seeing in this, which it's so great here in and of its time. It would have to be different, but it still could be as good. But not. Yes. Right. I just wanted to say, while we're talking about the dialogue, that this is based on a novel. The screenplay was co-written by Billy Wilder, which is another like feather in his cap in this project. But it's written on a novel, and I just wanted to say that I wanted to get into this for just a second. So the novel was written by James Cain. And he is the guy that wrote the famous book, The Postman Always Rings Twice. So famous novelist, American author, very famous American, novelist and journalist. So he wrote this as a book, as a novel. And what else he wrote? The Postman Always Rings Twice. That's one of the most, that's one of the great American. Yeah.
Just say it. It'll feel good.
I want to say that iconic is our word. It is our word. We now own it. We're taking of the word because it really is the touchstone for all of our film hour work, right?
We don't fuck with movies that aren't iconic.
No, and these films are iconic for good reason, and not a lot of films actually are as iconic as the ones we choose. I think it's the thread that holds all of our movie hours together.
Agreed.
They're not all iconic, but the vast majority are, and have such great iconography. But so yeah, I would love to go back and read the novel. It might be interesting. But anyway, it was translated into a screenplay in part by Billy Wilder, which is, I think, is cool. So I'll sing his praises on this, but definitely with props to, the original novel by James Cain. So that novel came out in 1943, and then they made this in 1944. So it was pretty quick. But
the movie itself takes place in 1938. The events in the movie, from what I garnered, it's happening in 1938 because they mentioned 1938 at some point, and I wrote it.
Yes. So
I could be wrong.
I'm not sure. I'm not seeing that, but I take your word for it. Yes, it is. It does. The plot actually takes place in 1938. I'm confirming that here as well. And it's so great because it takes place in Los Angeles. And we talked about how Sunset Boulevard featured Schwab's Pharmacy, which for the fuck of me, I could not remember because I have Corona brain. And I'm forgetting the most obvious.
It's because you have so many other important film facts. You're a veritable, you are a veritable, now who's Corona brain. You're somebody that knows a lot about movies. You get it. It's not Corona brain. You got too many other facts in there. You got to make room for, some aren't gonna make it.
Yes, I do not have and have not had yet coronavirus that I know of. So it's not true Corona brain, but something's happening. But anyway, yeah. So like you had Schwab's drugstore in Sunset, in this film you have the Hollywood Bowl, which I have seen many a musical act. I saw Bjork there. I saw Kraftwerk there. Incredible. I saw The Little Mermaid live with the original singing voice of Ariel live on stage. I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey live there with the full orchestra. So great. Great memories there. And it's one of those places, and I mentioned this in the Sunset Boulevard filming, but it bears repeating, that there are just places that are just magical to people. And that is one of those historically significant landmarks of a place, the Hollywood Bowl. And it's so romantic and interesting when he and Phyllis, played by Barbara Stanwyck, has a stepdaughter in the film, and who's a younger, more teenage age person. And she and Fred MacMurray character at one point climb up in the hills to kind of get a vantage point. So they're seeing the Hollywood Bowl for free. They didn't actually go there, but they're up in the hills behind in the trees, looking down on it and watching the show with the audience, which I think is so beautiful and just nice in the film. I don't know why, but yeah.
If I may, that what you're referencing happens in the third act of the film, and it's a beautiful moment where Mr. Neff, the protagonist or antagonist, however you want to read it, is taking Lola, the stepdaughter of Phyllis Dietrichson, to that cliff, but it's so blatantly obvious that they're on a set and there's just a projector screen there of the Hollywood Bowl. But it's still beautiful and it translates, but it's just as somebody in 2020 watching it, it's just if I were to have a green screen right behind me, it was just
that's okay,
very obvious. But I do want to say this though. I've only been to LA a handful of times, and it's so magical, especially for somebody like myself who is a cinephile and just loves all things Hollywood and celebrity and movies. And I will make it a point to visit the Hollywood Bowl as early as I can. But I wanted to say that your point about there are certain places that are just magic, that just in and of themselves are magic. And I'm saying all of that to say that, you know, noir is a very big genre and it goes beyond Hollywood noir. And so far we've done Sunset Boulevard and now we're doing this, which are very much Hollywood noir. But there is something about, and I'm wondering, because I don't know much about the genre, if noir started with Hollywood as set and setting or started in Hollywood, because it is meta, right? Because it's Hollywood commentating on Hollywood in a way.
Right.
Sunset Boulevard is about celebrity and fame, Hollywood. This is not about celebrity and fame, but it's still taking place in California. It still has that set and setting and that magic of those certain scenes and settings. So I'm just wondering, like do you feel, yeah, just talk to me about that. I don't know.
Meaning dark comes really from like older German expressionism, like Dr. Caligari, those really old, even silent films that really accentuate like shadow and darkness. Okay. And it's like the extreme expression of darkness and shadow on film. So, okay. But in the 40s and 50s, later on, you had Hollywood play with that style and imagery in crime drama a lot. So it's mostly crime drama in the 40s and 50s in terms of American film noir, but it definitely has its roots in like low-key black and white German expressionist style of filmmaking, which is my favorite. Like I love old German cinema, especially like M and Metropolis by Fritz Lang, who's one of my, if not my very favorite director of all time. Like, and we talked in our Madonna hour about how he influenced the Blonde Ambition tour and with Metropolis and the monocle that Madonna has and all that. And so I just love that moody like imagery and the creative, getting more creative with cinematography, not just trying to like depict something or show something, but go further and suggest something. So it's like, you know. And
say that one more time. Say that one more time for the people in the back. That was beautiful. Say that again.
Yeah, not just depicting something, but suggesting something. So you can't believe you got me to actually repeat it. But yeah, I think it's important because you know, it's the line where you cross, where you're actually, it's more creative. It's not just like a documentary would be the complete other end of the scale, right? Where you're trying to depict and you're not trying to inject any perspective or creativity. You're just trying to depict it as straightforward as possible. So film noir is definitely on the other end where it's stylized, and that's the end I really want to live on. I actually like extremes. Like I like when like women have like really platinum hair or really like black hair. I don't know why the contrast is so interesting, but I actually love documentaries because of that gritty feel, that hyper realism. But then I love genre stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street or this film, which is film noir, because it's so like stylized on the opposite end of the spectrum, and it's so creative. But yeah, the freedoms that it allows you to be in a genre, to be more creative. Like, oh my God, in this film, when one of my favorite images in this film is this scene where Phyllis is right outside Walter's door, and but she's about to go in and almost even knock, and then she realizes Keyes is in there, who works with Walter in the story, and Keyes, of course, is not in on their scheme that they're running, which I'll let you describe in a minute if you want to. But this great imagery of, so she's about to enter Walter's apartment, who she's in a mad love affair with now. But right before she knocks, she realizes she hears Keyes' voice. So she doesn't knock and she hides to the left of the door, which you know, outways. And so when Keys leaves, she stays behind the door, and she pulls the door handle back a little to let Walter know she's there, and he gets it. And there's this great shot of her, right, with the, I have to kind of interact, like act it out. She's like this on the back side of the door in like a trench coat or something, and it's just so fucking beautiful. And like the way they set the shot up, you can tell it's deliberate to like look. I love it. That's one of my favorite images from the film, because it's like it's a woman in peril behind this door, and you know that if only Keys could see that she was behind the door, their whole scheme would fall apart. So
World.
Yeah.
Don't you have any peppermint or something?
Oh, sorry. Bottle of soda water?
No.
Who do you suspect?
Well, maybe I like to make things easy for myself, but I always tend to suspect the beneficiary.
You know what?
Yeah, that wide-eyed dame that just didn't know anything about anything.
Oh, you're crazy, Keith. She wasn't even on the train.
I know she wasn't, Walter. I don't claim to know how it was worked or who worked it, but all I know is that it was worked. I've got to get to a drugstore. This thing feels like a hunk of concrete inside me. Good night, Walter.
Good night, Keith.
See you at the office in the morning.
Yeah.
I'd like to move in on her right now, tonight. But for Norton and his tri-pants ideas about company policy, I'd have the police after her so fast it'd make her head spin. They put her through the ringer. And, brother, the things they would squeeze out.
And they haven't got a single thing to go on, Keith.
Oh, not too much. Just 26 years' experience, all the percentage there is, and this hunk of concrete in my stomach. You one of those things?
Good night, Keith.
So long, Walter.
They're dancing on the razor's edge at that part of the movie. I just really appreciate like you sharing your knowledge on the history of noir, because I'm only so familiar with, I'm familiar with it as a genre, and I've seen certain films that would be categorized as such, but I appreciate you sharing like the origins of it, and I'm not at all surprised that it comes from German, expressionism, and this is going to be a little bit of a sidebar for both you and the audience, because I know we haven't talked about it, but there is a show on Netflix that is a German-produced show, and it is subtitled, called Babylon Berlin, and it's almost like a magical realism version of an alternate history. So it takes place in the Weimar Republic, which was basically Germany before World War II, which had World War II not happened, it was like, imagine Manhattan on crack, like it was the center of art and sex and everything new and young and fresh and science and art, all of it. So it has 3 seasons. It's on Netflix. I highly recommend it, but it's very clear that noir, as I'm learning about it, definitely came out of that era, pre-World War II, and just almost like an optimistic view of things that was had the luxury of being like self-reflective. And then World War II happened, and then things kind of shifted. But anyways, that's just like a little sidebar. I recommend Babylon Berlin all day, every day. But also, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I gotta see that. That sounds really interesting, and I think like with American films, like the whole crime plot line that's like a through line through all the film noir makes sense, because crime is like dark and gritty, and with film noir you're playing with so much like night scenes and shadows, and so you get that moody atmosphere, Yeah.
And Babylon Berlin is colorized. It's not colorized. It was filmed in color. It's a modern production. But it would be interesting to see it in black and white, just because the aesthetics of the show are so beautiful. But going back to the black and white for a moment, the scene that you were mentioning where she shows up at Neff's door and Keyes is in there and she's hiding behind the door, and the way the light hits her, and the use of like, it's just interesting as you learn more about movies and you get to share movies with your friends, like the things that your eye is drawn to. People will draw your attention to things that you otherwise would miss, and those little things are game changers. And so I'm just so grateful to you for like pointing these things out. But yeah, I mean that's all I have to say on that, and I will let you re-steer us to where we need to be.
Well,
I'm getting
I
excited.
think at this point we can just sum up the plot a little bit more. So
Yeah.
Walter Neff, as we've touched on, is we don't have to go plot point by plot point because watch the movie.
Just overview, yeah.
Just watch the movie. But Walter is this insurance salesman, and of course, at first, he does not want to partake in anything unsavory with Phyllis. She's suggesting it and like putting it in his like subconscious without being blatant, because, and she even feigns like insult when he suggests otherwise, right? Because she does not want to be like, she's really testing the waters with him at first, and then she's way more vulnerable when she visits his apartment later and is like, look, I'm in this totally unhappy marriage. And that's when he like totally changes course and is like, all right, we're gonna do this, we're gonna like pull this scam of insurance, we're gonna kill your husband basically, and we're going to, and I know how to do it, and I'm the only one that knows how to do it because I'm gonna work this from the inside, because I am working at this insurance company for many years, and I know this guy Keyes, who's the key person that you have to go up against when you're filing your claim, and he nails you to the wall every time. But I know every trick in the book, so I'm the only way we can really pull this off. But then, like, as you're in it with them, the whole film just closes in on them. It's more claustrophobic, and it gets so heightened, the sense of they're in it together, and they keep eating it over and again in the dialogue in different ways, who repeat it to each other in this one way of like, we're gonna do this
Straight down the line.
Straight down the line. And then you have Keyes who has his own narrative that reinforces it, and his narrative is a trolley car or a train where both people have to get on it and they have to ride it, and you have to ride. If you're gonna conspire on something like this, then you have to both board the train and ride it to the end, and the end is the cemetery.
Right.
So you're constantly bombarded by this notion they're in it together, and that like this are high, and the tension and the suspense just like mounts and mounts. But the film is very cool too, like not overly thick, and there's just so much to love about this film. But in a nutshell, that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's such a simple premise for a film, right? Like, insurance salesman shows up to sell or update somebody's policy, and the Mister is not home, and instead sexy Barbara Stanwyck is home, and immediate seduction ensues, and of course everyone falls in love within like 2 minutes. And can we just talk about like something that happens in like films of that era, where like the way men would grab, like the way men kissed women is like they would grab their shoulders, you know what I'm talking about? Like
Yeah.
Pretend like I'm Neff, you would just be like, and then they just like shove their face in. It's like such like, you see, that's my fan, sorry. You see that like every movie from that era. It's like such a weird thing. They just like grab and boom. Anyways.
Damn.
But it's such a simple premise. Like, seductress comes down, Neff is immediately like not thinking clearly anymore. And I am the first to admit that I really thought that Mrs. Dietrichson, Phyllis Dietrichson, as played by the Queen Stanwyck, I really thought she was with him and in love with him until the third act, when I realized, oh no, this bitch has been playing everybody.
Yes.
I dropped the V on purpose. Everybody. So, you know, you have this very, like, just mundane moment where he's talking to her about insurance and he lets her know what double indemnity is. And she's like, oh, well, what if I took out an accident policy, but I didn't tell my husband, and I didn't, and immediately he knows that that's a red flag, and she wants to off her husband, but he's so pussy struck that he's like ready to go. He's like, let's do this. And then they concoct the perfect murder, right?
Not right away. First, he's like, I'll get out of here, but quick. And I like how he says, but quick. There's two things I'll say real quick. He says, oh, baby, I'll get out of here. I'll get out of here, but quick. So no one says, I'll get out of here, but quick anymore. Meaning,
right.
Just the turn of phrase. No one would say that. Another one is, he says something to her, and she goes, fresh.
Yeah.
She calls him
anymore.
He's being fresh, but you never hear that anymore. And I love those kind of things that you never hear anymore. But yeah, yes. So then, pretty quickly, he's all on board with her. But she kind of pretends to be Miss Innocent, and you buy a lot of it. You know, there's something more there, but we wouldn't dream there's so much more there to her, to the point where later Lola says, she killed my mom too. And I saw her, this look overcome her, and it's like this huge revelation. Lola even says that, yes.
The twist, though. Okay.
Yeah. And Lola even says that she's practicing in the mirror with the veil. Like, this bitch is evil.
So, yeah, I mean, I honestly, like, I was like, okay, Phyllis and Neff, they're in love, they're on the same page. And then, you know, you do get to meet her husband, and he's whatever. Oh, that's what I was going to say. The movie opens, the opening credits are just like this shot of a gentleman on crutches walking.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, who's that? And then it comes. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Are you going to explain what that is? Because I can explain that part.
Please.
So what is so genius is that they open with this imagery that's black and white, obviously, and very highly contrasted, where you have in full black shadow a man on crutches with white behind him, right? Later on, Walter's character is impersonating her husband. That's part of their scheme. They have this elaborate scheme where he's very much in the shadows because he's boarding a train at night and he doesn't let anyone see his face. So the shadow, it could be anyone, right? It's shadow play of like this person is totally in the shadow because they're supposed to be someone else. And you don't see who they are, you only see the silhouette, right? But the crutches are like what your eye goes to. So it's this great thing, but I love that they opened the film that way.
And it, you know, the much like Sunset Boulevard, you have the voiceover of a male narrator, where you're in Sunset Boulevard, he basically, it's not so much a whodunit, it's a why done it, right? Like he tells you right out of the gate, I got killed. Let me tell you what happened. In this one, it goes from the opening credits to Neff as an insurance agent in his office, talking into his dictaphone, basically confessing the events that the audience will see play out to his boss, Keys. Keys is my favorite character in this movie. And at the end of the movie, you see it all kind of come full circle, and you realize that, like, Keys is portrayed as like a very capable, intelligent, experienced, smart insurance man, and he knows like how to decipher the bullshit claims from the real ones. And you don't really understand like the weight of that until you get to the third act. But you get these cuts throughout the movie of Neff talking in and confessing into his dictaphone, specifically confessing to Keyes what will eventually happen. But I just, yeah, I mean, they basically, Neff and Phyllis are up until the third act, I thought they had it. I thought they had the perfect murder, the perfect crime. They're gonna kill the husband, they're gonna dump him off a train, and under the double indemnity clause, they'll get double the money because it was an accident and under extraordinary circumstances. And then you get introduced to Lola, who is Phyllis's stepdaughter, and you realize that Phyllis was her mother's nurse before she passed away.
But you don't know when Lola's explaining it, she doesn't say who it is. She just said that happened with the nurse. And then at the end of the story, you realize the nurse intentionally killed the mother, and then she drops the bombshell that the nurse was.
Phyllis had previously told Neff that I nursed my ex-husband's wife. So Neff knew it. So when Lola tells him, oh, Phyllis, my stepmother, was my mother's nurse, Neff is like, oh shit, the bitch that I'm in love with and I just murdered somebody for has just straight up been murdering people. She's just offing people all the way to the pot of gold.
Since you love Keyes so much, how great is that dialogue in there's a scene where there's a great sequence where Walter Neff and Keyes are called into their boss's office. And their boss makes an absolute fool of himself. He's one of these guys that basically is the son of the previous CEO or whatever, and is now the CEO. You have so many of these stories where it's like the twerp son or son-in-law is now in charge through nepotism, essentially.
And the White House right now.
Hashtag me too, everything, right? Our woke generation now knows it. Yeah. But at the time, this film was woke, showing it, right? And so it's so great. But Keyes lets him have it, right? He's like, he talks a lot about there's this repetitive dialogue joke about wardrobe, because when they first enter the office of this twerp who doesn't know shit what he's talking about, right? He doesn't know shit, but he thinks he does. He thinks he knows it all. But he hasn't seen insurance on the ground floor, right? He hasn't actually put the time in to really know how these things work. So Keyes makes a total joke of him. Like, you don't know anything. Do you know about, have you ever read an actuary table? Do you know about suicide? I know about suicide by race, by gender, by type, and the dialogue's just flying, and it's so damn good. But when they first go into this guy's office, he says, oh, what, you don't have a coat on? Meaning like a sport coat over your dress shirt. And he said, I didn't know this would be a formal meeting. And then he calls in Phyllis and he says, watch this, basically. And he makes a total ass of himself. Phyllis gives him what for, storms out. But by the end of this scene, as they're walking out, Keyes says, next time I'll rent a tuxedo. So fucking great. So classic. Such great dialogue. I just love every single thing about this film and the dialogue.
It's so good. It's so good. I mean, going back to the dialogue, like the trolley metaphor, right, is what you brought up earlier, is something that it's like a lesson that Keyes, as the boss, is just trying to impart to Neff. He's like, you know, when people are in cahoots, they're on a trolley, they're going to write it to the end of the line, and then the end of the line is a cemetery because it never ends well and you'll always get caught, basically. Right. And I counted 4 times in the movie where Phyllis says, or Neff said, I think it's mostly Phyllis, says it to Neff in their like love affair, that like, it straight to the end of the line, baby. You know, like, we're going all the way, baby. And it's not until the third act when Neff realizes that really Phyllis has been playing everybody from the start, that he's on his way to the Senate. She's going to get him caught. So he's got some decisions to make. But and as sorry, go ahead.
And in the freakiest twist, she's screwing some like teenage boy, like that her stepdaughter is in love with. She's like screwing this guy. They must be screwing because they're totally having this like love affair. And of course,
they're screwing. And it's kind of like a throwaway moment early on when you get introduced to Lola, her stepdaughter, that she's sneaking off to meet this guy that she's into, right? And then in the third act, you realize that Phyllis has been effing this guy the entire time. Meanwhile, Neff thinks she's all about his life, and
we do too. Yeah. And we do too. We're like so caught off guard.
I did not see it coming. I didn't. And at the beginning of the movie, when in that first scene where Neff begins to confess into the dictaphone, he says something to the effect of, "I killed her, and I killed her for the money, and I didn't get the money or the girl." And we learn that that's the case because in the third act, he ultimately, in the heat of passion, is so upset that Phyllis has been playing him and that she really is using him that he shoots her. But I want to talk about that scene in a little bit more detail. But
well, it's interesting that in Sunset Boulevard and this film, both Billy Wilder film noirs that we are doing, the central male figure who has narrated the film is shot at the end of the film by a strong female character. So there's that distinction. But those films feel very different, actually. There's a lot of similarities, and then there's a lot of departure. But that's an interesting distinction, is that the central male character who has narrated the film is shot by the female character who's the strong character. It's just interesting.
It is, and I honestly hadn't even put two and two together that Gloria Swanson shot what's his face and
Norma and Sunset Boulevard, right?
Yes. Now she shoots Neff in this film, but also what happens in both films is that both women ultimately meet their demise, whereas the men get to go on about their lives, essentially.
Then they're killed.
We don't necessarily know that Neff doesn't meet his justice, but the movie doesn't tell you that part of the story because he clearly confesses. So eventually it's going to catch up with him, but you just don't see that on camera. But I don't know. The end scene in the third act where Neff has figured out that he's been played the entire time. And it's literally the same moment that I, as an audience member, figured out that she had been playing him. She orchestrated the mother's death, her husband's ex-wife. She clearly orchestrated her husband's death on the train. She's probably going to orchestrate Neff's death and Lola's death and whomever is necessary to get her money and get hers. And there's this beautiful moment in the third act where Neff is fully aware of what's going on, and he confronts her, and she says, quote unquote, "I'm rotten to the heart." She lets him know, "You're right, you called me on it, busted." And she shoots him, and then he's like, I couldn't tell if she missed him or if she just didn't get a kill shot, but he comes closer to her and he's like, "You got to do better than that, baby," or something. And she says, "It wasn't until this moment that I realized I loved you, because I can always fire the second shot, and I couldn't fire the second shot." And they embrace, and then he kills her twice, 2 shots. It's so fucking poetic. It's how do you write this?
Yes. I have something else I want to talk about that's kind of more relevant to well, you know how we talk about not like being able to remove your 2020 glasses and look at something in the context of its time. So it's such an incredible thing that we're so much more woke as a culture now, and that minorities, LGBT and Black and all minorities are getting their due now, more so than, of course, at the time of this film. In this film, you have kind of a cringeworthy scene where Phyllis comes to visit Neff's apartment for the first time, and she says, how do you keep it up, because everything is very neat and clean. And he says a colored woman comes in every week and cleans. And it's just, the dismissive tone of it is so like, it's audiences thought nothing about this when it came out, of course, because this was just how it was then. And it's interesting because it's a little shocking now when you see it. It's like, it's so dismissive. It's so like the way he has to say it's a colored woman, not just oh, I have a cleaner. It's a colored woman. It's just so like disgusting in a way. But for me, and now we can talk a little bit about how like HBO removed Gone with the Wind, stuff like that. I think it's ridiculous because, and I'll tell you why. I mean, there's no one who's more of a proponent for the rights of these people than you or I, for every good reason. But the reason I think it's ridiculous is it's a disservice in a way. Like, we learn more from the fact that this is how, it's shocking that this is how it used to be. It's disgusting and terrible, but it is how it used to be, and we need to learn from that and have that example. So these things are great works of art, but they're in a context. Everything has, we have to be smart enough and have the morals enough to put it in a context for ourselves, each and every one of us. And I don't even think it needs to have a label. It is what it is. It's of a context. And even I was watching a clip on YouTube of Whoopi Goldberg talking about this on The View, and she was making the same argument I'm making now about how these things we learn from, and they're of a context, they're of an era. So once again, remove your 2020 lenses. But I just had that rant that I wanted to go on a little bit. But it was shocking to see it again. And there's a scene in it's totally unrelated, but there's a scene in Bill and Ted's Awesome Adventure, whatever the hell that film is called.
Excellent Adventure.
Excellent Adventure. Yes, how dare I? But there's a scene where they like hug each other for a second, and then they step back and go, whoa, fag. And I watched it again recently, and I was like, so like snapped out of the experience of the film for that moment, because we don't live in the era that film was made in. At the time that film was made, I don't think the audience was like hate fueling stuff enough, but definitely we're not like snapped out of it either, right? Because it wasn't, it was so socially acceptable at the time, but really like was hurtful to me, like very hurtful. Being it as a gay person, but it's just so weird about that.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that experience would be like. And it's unfortunate because it's happening so much more frequently at an exponential rate, that we're remembering or rediscovering films that we loved or art that we loved that had very problematic moments. And luckily there's a course correction going on. I mean, we're seeing it with even just brands. Like, look at what's happening with Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima's. Like, they're rebranding those things, and that's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, I was 7-8 years old when Excellent Journey came out, like, we didn't think twice about that. Like,
Right.
I think we knew that it wasn't like a great thing, but we also, it wasn't like outrage, you know, because it was so normalized.
Something you would hear in the halls of any high school. Like,
right. And
shocking, you know, it's weird.
it is weird because we're living, you know, even like in most of our movie hours, we usually have at least one point where we have to say, like, take off your 2020 glasses, but we're filming this video in June 18th of 2020, and if you're watching this, you know what's going on in the world right now. So it's like, yes, we want to watch these movies without our 2020 glasses on, but we also need context. And to your point about a movie like this, like Double Indemnity, where he has to say that it's a colored woman that's his maid, is very much just something that was of the time, right? Like, everyone, there was no help that was white, you know, the help was colored. And there's also a scene in Double Indemnity where he's going somewhere and he parks his car in a garage, and there's a black gentleman that he has a little interaction with, and he's perfectly, like, he treats him just like an equal. There's no like, hey, you know, he has it with him, and he treats him as equal. But in another scene, he's like, oh, it's a colored woman. But
yes,
if we take our 2020 glasses off, not to make excuses for any of that behavior, that was normal.
Right.
That was normal. So that didn't mean like somebody was being explicitly hateful, even though it was racist.
Right.
It just, they didn't know, and maybe they knew better, but we'll just have to assume that they didn't know better. I don't know.
Right. And I don't want to speak for any Black people, but as like a gay man, even, I wouldn't want like any film that had derogatory gay stuff to be censored. Like, I don't want any art to be censored. Not because it's offensive. Yes, it's offensive, and I'm offended or snapped out of the experience in those moments where you're like, oh, like, it's like a slap in the face for a minute.
Right.
I'm like, this is how it was at the time, but I don't want it censored. Like, if anything, those things need to live on as examples of how offensive those things did to be.
What not to, yeah. And
right.
I feel the same way about, you know, a lot of misogynist things that go on. Like, I love Kevin Spacey, and I still love his art, but it's like, I can't watch the beautiful piece of art that is his performance at the end of Seven without it being tainted. And now, most recently, Danny Masterson, who I used to have a huge crush on when I was younger, who played Hyde in that 70s show, has long, for the past couple of years, has had some allegations thrown at him around sexual misconduct. But up until this week, he's now been charged with 3 counts of rape. So it's like, now you've taken the 70s show from me, and Hyde was my favorite character, and he played Hyde, and it's like, now I want to watch that show, but every time I watch that show, it's fucking ruined. And I don't believe in erasing history. And with regards to Gone with the Wind, here's how I feel about this. You should not be removing films, I don't think. I mean, unless they're fucking like Nazi propaganda films, I don't think things. Gone with the Wind is an accurate depiction of those events in the antebellum South. Now, Hattie McDaniel's, oh God, please tell me that's her last name. The woman who played the help in Gone with the Wind underwent a lot of shit in real life. And unfortunately, her being portrayed as the help in a lot of movies is her legacy. But you can't erase history. Erasing history doesn't fix history. I think people need context. I think people need to know, hey, this wasn't okay, but this happened. If you take it away and pretend like it didn't happen, how are we going to learn? And they're doing the same thing now at Disney with Song of the South, which is, to this day, one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's because when you watch Song of the South as a child, you don't see Uncle Remus as a caricaturized Black person, right? And he is, but you don't see it that way. You just see it as, oh, that's Uncle Remus, and he's telling us these amazing stories about Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear. And Disney has a ride in 4 of its 6 parks called Splash Mountain. And now people want to take Splash Mountain down and replace it with a Princess and the Frog narrative, which, hey, I'm all here for Princess and the Frog. She deserves a lot more than a ride. Princess Tiana does. But if you're gonna say Song of the South is bad and can't be on Disney Plus and has to stay in the vault, then why is Splash Mountain a ride? So you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Right. It's almost, there's a sense of overcorrection, right, that can happen. And we've talked about Michael Jackson a lot. I see all of his fans like denying it, but I'm gonna say that I do give a lot of respect to people who are now coming forward with allegations against him, and it saddens me and like ruins so many things to my core. But we also have to be adults and separate the art from the artist. You have to be able to separate certain things and appreciate the good in certain projects, while also putting them in context and while also saying that many things are not good.
Amen. And I think, I don't want to go down a Michael Jackson rabbit hole, but a lot of people can't separate the art from the artist, and that's totally valid, and I get it. I'm personally am somebody that can and chooses to, but that doesn't mean that every time I listen to some of my favorite art, which is a product of Michael Jackson, that it's not tainted. But much like what you see happening with J.K. Rowling and the transphobic backlash against some of her more recent comments, Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter, recently came out and said, I stand with trans people, okay, and whatever that quote was, like, he was like, I'm not with her comments, but I hope this doesn't take away from the light and the magic and the hope that the stories she wrote. So I think we have to separate a little bit the art from the artist.
Like, back to what I said about the overcorrection, like when I first watched Leaving Neverland, I was like rocked to my core. And I had always known about all the allegations and the whole story and had followed it because I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. He's been a huge inspiration to me, as has Madonna, Prince, and all the other big pop icons. But so when all that first happened and I had to like wrestle with it and come to terms with maybe, who knows, but maybe there's truth to this. And once you make that assertion that maybe there's truth, like a lot of things are ruined for you as a fan. And I couldn't listen to him right away. I, as you know, used to have a life-size cardboard cutout of Michael Jackson in honor of him in this room right behind the shoulder. But I had to take that down, and maybe that was like a mini overcorrection of me, where it all had to go away for a little bit, at least to reconcile. And then once you reconcile, you can come back and maybe meet in the middle where, okay, I get to a place where now if I hear him on the radio, I'm okay. I don't have to like say something to Jonathan or whoever I'm with. It can be okay that he's being played publicly in the background or whatever, to a point where I don't have to like say something. But at first you're like, I don't want to hear him. I don't want to see him, that kind of thing. And who knows, none of us are here to be like the ultimate judge and jury, but it is what it is.
And I think for me, and this might sound a little bit like of an apologist mentality, and I recognize that it probably is, but nobody's perfect, and most art has been gifted to the world by very highly imperfect people.
Definitely.
Picasso. I mean, you name an artist, name somebody that has gifted the world a piece of art, and they probably did some unsavory things. So how do we reconcile that? I don't know, but erasing it is certainly not the answer, in my opinion. I think watching it, reading it, looking at it, listening to it with an educated mind is like the best way forward. And
yeah,
I don't know. It's certainly a lot of overcorrecting going on right now, which is necessary. But
I think it's complicated, right? Because I think I mentioned this in one of our previous movie hours, but nothing's black and white, and it's those intricacies that make life worth living. But you have to think of things on a lot of different levels all at the same time, right? And these areas are highly complicated, but there's a comfort and a push right now to oversimplify and over black and white and overcorrect.
But the erasure of history and the erasure, to me, removing Gone with the Wind, and I know they weren't like burning the film, but they're just the symbology of removing it from a streaming platform, to me, is the equivalent of burning a book. No. No, don't do that. Hitler did that. Hitler did that. Hitler tried to erase the history of an entire populace of peoples dating back to pre-biblical times. You don't erase history. That's not how you fucking fix it. Like, and look at, I mean, this is, okay. Hitler was an animal rights advocate. Like, how do you make sense of that? Like, this guy was a vegetarian, was an animal rights advocate, but took fucking human beings into ovens. Like, human beings can compartmentalize to a fault, and we decide what's okay and what's not. But like, to me, to not listen to Thriller ever again, or to like, that would be like, oh, you can't look at that Picasso because he fucked a bunch of underage girls. You can't watch Annie Hall because whatever, Woody Allen did whatever the fuck he did. Like, how many movies did Harvey Weinstein produce? Am I never gonna watch The Cosby Show again? No, I'm hella gonna watch The Cosby Show because it's fucking good. And it's tainted, but it's Cosby Show's message out, the good of the art outweighs the bad of the artist. For me. Man, we went to church. Okay. So I just want to mention to your original selling point on this movie, Chad, is some of the amazing dialogue that struck me, because you said the dialogue was what made you fall in love with this movie. And, you know, very early on in the first act, I mean, we talked about the speeding limit analogy that went on, but there's a moment when Neff leaves Phyllis's house after that first encounter, and he clearly knows that this bitch wants an accidental insurance policy because she wants to off her husband. He's driving in his car and he says, "How could I have known that murder can sometimes smell like honeysuckle?" What? Who? What? Who writes dialogue like that? Okay.
I love it.
And then he comes back to meet her on another occasion, and she's dressed in like this beautiful, like high-waisted pant with like this beautiful blouse. And she's like, "Can I offer you a glass of lemonade?" And he says, "Yes, unless you got a bottle of beer that's not working."
And then he says, when she makes it tea, and he said, "I wonder if some whiskey would get this up on its feet."
And it would.
Yeah, and it would.
Next time somebody offers me a non-alcoholic beverage, I will reply with, unless you got a bottle of beer, that's not working. What?
Yeah,
Oh
great.
my God. And then she's talking about how like she
Were
would,
people just wittier back then, or is it just really good dialogue, or both maybe?
maybe a both and. I feel like people are definitely less witty now. And we're also living in like PC culture, so like you can't say nothing. But oh man, like she's talking about how her
With a different meaning.
yeah, well, yeah, yeah. When he's talking about how like he's essentially she's got her hooks in him, he literally says the hook was too strong. Um, she's talking about how her husband, who they ultimately plot to murder for the
Yeah.
insurance policy, how she would like crochet for him. She's like, my thumbs would get tired or something, and then Neff is like, well, if his thumbs get tired, like I'll take his place. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's great.
banter.
There's a great dialogue where when they first meet, she says she was sunbathing, almost not presumably, but like very close to it. And he says, hope there weren't any pigeons around, meaning like watching her, but pigeons meaning peeping toms too. So there's
Yeah.
great like double entendre play going on.
So many entendres, multiple entendres.
On top of entendres.
Entendre on top of entendre. My favorite line is I don't remember exactly what scene it's in, but it's Neff talking to Phyllis, and I think they're in their plotting and scheming mode, and he says, baby, they'll make you just as sure as 10 dimes make a dollar, and I don't want you to hang, baby. Like, they
Yeah.
will make you as sure as 10 dimes make a dollar. Like, and that vaudevillian, like, cadence of the movies of that time is just so sexy and musical, and I love it. And then, the final act, Keyes, the boss, had it figured out pretty much all along, and Neff finally confesses and literally almost falls into his arms in the final shot of the movie. And he says, to Keyes, he's like, you had me figured out, and it was me, it was the guy across the desk, it was closer than you ever knew. And Keyes says, closer than that, ... and it fades to black, letting him know that, like, you were my friend, like,
Right.
I can't believe it, you did this thing. It's just, oh, I love Keyes, I love this movie, I love you for recommending it. I'm done.
Let me quote this one thing before you close us out.
Please.
This is a direct dialogue from the film.
Okay.
So we just sat there and she started crying softly like the rain on the window. What? And we didn't say anything. Maybe she had stopped thinking about it, but I hadn't. I couldn't because it was all tied up with something I'd been thinking about for years, since long before I ever ran into Phyllis Dietrichson. Because you know how it is, Keyes. In this business, you can't sleep for trying to figure out the tricks that they could pull on you. You're like the guy behind the roulette wheel, watching the customers to make sure they don't crook the house. And then one night you get to thinking how you could crook that yourself. It's smart because you've got that wheel right under your hands. You know every notch in it by heart. And you figure out all you need is a plan out front, a shill to put down the bet. And suddenly the doorbell rings and the whole setup is right in the room with you. Just great dialogue. So great.
It's fucking perfection. It's just
Perfect.
It's poetry. It's beautiful.
Like how much of it comes from the novel, because so we got to hand it to the novelist as well. But it's perfect.
It is. I'm so glad that you recommended it. And yeah, shout outs to the filmmaker, because he's clearly got an impressive resume. With this, Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot. What more can you ask of somebody? It would be interesting if anybody who's watching this has read the novel and knows how different or similar it is, please comment below. But with that, I think, yeah, we should just let you know that this is a must-see, and it invites so many important questions about cinema and about all of the things, all of the current events. So thank you to Chad for this excellent recommendation, and to Barbara Stanwyck for being a screen queen, and to Black and White Lighting. With that, we invite you to subscribe. Please like the video if you liked it, and comment, and we will be back with some, I don't know, what, Nightmare on Elm Street, some Disney movies. We got it all coming. So cheers. We will see y'all on the other side.
See you on the other side.